Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You join our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country.
The most racist thing a person could tell me is that I'm supposed to choose something based on my race.
You ain't black.
Joe Biden has never been a friend to African Americans.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of what we call
Truth Over Facts.
China lied to us. They destroyed test kits. They lied to their own people.
Since Ronald Reagan, we haven't had a president more engaged and more involved in the Western Hemisphere than this administration, and it's been a great partnership to work with them on.
Well, you've heard of The View, but welcome to The Right View.
And with us today is the Motor City Madman, Ted Nugent, because this isn't your typical political show.
It's the most important election in our lifetime.
Joe Biden, who has a dismal record of economic failure and absolutely terrible ideas for the future.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign. Tonight, Senator Lindsey Graham, Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, is with us, and we are so excited. Senator Graham, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. You do an awesome job. This is a good show. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. In recent weeks, we've learned some really interesting information. We learned that the Obama-Biden administration weaponized the intelligence community to take down the incoming Trump administration. They named specific individuals, targeted incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, and FBI agents even discussed the potential to force General Flynn to lie during interrogation. This is an unprecedented and corrupt abuse of power any way you look at it. And the Obama-Biden administration has been caught red-handed. Right. Senator Graham, you've been working really hard from the very beginning of the Trump administration to get to the bottom of this unprecedented abuse of power. Joe Biden's name actually appeared on the list of officials who requested the unmasking of General Flynn's name before President Trump took office. Right. This is despite the former vice president, by the way, denying any knowledge of an investigation into General Flynn. Now, we know he forgets a lot, but I don't know about that. Now it's been revealed that Biden himself was one of the people requesting the unmasking. So he's been caught in a flat-out lie. Right. You recently sent a letter to the acting director of National Intelligence, Rick Grinnell, to provide a list of names of officials who requested the unmasking of any other members of President Trump's campaign or transition staff. So let's dive into this subject, which I think is probably new to a lot of Americans. Right. Can you tell people what exactly is unmasking and tell us more about how important and even dangerous the acts against General Flynn and President Trump's administration were?
Well, so there's a lot to unpack there. So what is unmasking? We surveil people all the time, not for criminal purposes, but for national security purposes, following ambassadors from foreign governments that are adversaries of the United States. To surveil somebody in the United States, you have to have a warrant. But when a foreign agent is overseas, you can collect without a warrant. So let's give an example. Let's say a Chinese student comes to a university here in the United States. They actually are an intelligence operative, not just a student. We pick that up, we get a FISA warrant, and let's say you're in the class with the person or you know them. You could be caught in a conversation. The goal is to minimize, to flush that out of the system. You don't want American citizens' names popping up on intel gathering missions. That's not the purpose. The purpose is not to follow American citizens, it's to follow the foreign operative and see if they're doing anything wrong. So the outgoing administration, the Obama administration, apparently made a lot of requests to unmask conversations between the incoming National Security Advisor, General Flynn, and a Russian ambassador. Here's what scares the hell out of me. They have no business listening to the incoming administration. The incoming administration should be talking to world figures to set new policy. Now, you can make an unmasking request. That's not illegal, but you have to have a national security reason. So what are we looking for? Why did all these people want to unmask conversations that General Flynn was having as he was waiting to become the new national security advisor? Was it for a legitimate national security purpose, or were they trying to spy on the Trump campaign and figure out what they were going to do on national security front? That's why this is so important. And I made a request. Did they unmask conversations between Trump family members, between the inauguration and the election? If so, what was that all about?
Yeah.
Again, in my daily life as a U.S. Senator, I'm talking to the Israeli ambassador today. Sometimes you have intelligence gathering operations against friends and foes, but when an American citizen is involved, you need to flush that out of the system. I would be really offended if the executive branch was listening into my conversations, because I'm in a different branch of government. I may have a different view of Obama foreign policy, which I did all the time. It's none of their business to find out what I'm doing as a U.S. Senator. So why are we going to do this? To make sure it never happens again. Unmasking is an intelligence tool that could be abused for political purposes. As to General Flynn, the guy got screwed. Okay.
Yeah, it's really sad actually what happened to him. Go ahead.
So this is important. January the 4th, the Washington FBI officials, the professionals, said we found nothing to suggest that General Flynn was cooperating with the Russians, colluding with the Russians, and they wanted to end the inquiry, which started in August 2016. January the 4th, 2017, he's the National Security Advisor in waiting. They wanted to end the case, and our good friend Peter Strzok said, no, the 7th floor wants to keep looking at Flynn. That's McCabe and Comey. Now we know that Biden and others followed conversations with Flynn after the election, before the inauguration, and Ron Johnson and the Homeland Security Committee will be looking at unmasking and transition. What will I be doing? I'm going to call the Department of Justice into the Judiciary Committee and let them explain to the country why they dropped the Flynn case. General Flynn should never have been prosecuted. He wasn't working with the Russians. They tricked him into a conversation. They never gave him a heads up about what they were looking at, and they withheld information. And this Judge Sullivan thing should scare everybody. I've been a lawyer in the military and the private sector. I've been a judge, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense counsel. I've never known in my entire legal career a judge resisting dismissing a case when the government makes a motion to dismiss the case against a criminal defendant because of misconduct on behalf of the government. You never punish the defendant because the government did something wrong. The fact that we're extending this is just a travesty. We will be looking at all things General Flynn.
Yeah, I actually want to get a little more into Judge Emmett Sullivan. So as you just said, the Department of Justice, once they realized what happened to General Flynn, dropped the case. However, Judge Emmett Sullivan, who is overseeing the case, has temporarily blocked the DOJ's attempt to drop the charges. And as you said, it makes absolutely no sense. So can you explain to the viewers at home what exactly that means and why this is really so detrimental and so scary as it relates to our judicial process? Are this judge's attempted actions unprecedented? I've never heard of this.
Well, and if there wasn't a Trump person, every criminal defense lawyer in the country would be screaming bloody murder.
Yep.
Here's what happened. The bar reviewed all things Crossfire Hurricane. You got Durham looking at whether or not they committed a crime against Carter Page by getting a warrant illegally. They took a second look at the Flynn case because these Castor characters were pretty damn shady. So they found information in a file not disclosed to the defense. And the question was, what's the purpose of the Flynn interview? To get him to lie, to get him fired? You don't interview somebody unless there's a criminal reason for it. The investigation was recommended to be closed about 3 weeks before the interview. So it wasn't a legitimate inquiry as to whether or not he was working with the Russians. They're just trying to get the guy because Obama hated Flynn. Flynn told the country, yeah, bin Laden's dead, but al-Qaeda is alive and well. They had a grudge against Flynn. And so here's where we're at. Judge Sullivan is not granting the government's motion to dismiss the case because of newly found evidence. He's contemplating holding General Flynn in contempt of court because he pled guilty twice. Well, I can tell you, people plead guilty all over this country to minimize the risk, to keep their family from going to jail. Yep. Because if I get convicted out, on a bunch of things, I'll plead guilty to one thing. Well, when the government makes a motion to dismiss the case because they found something helpful to the defense not disclosed, I've never known a judge to stop that motion from being granted. If Judge Sullivan punishes General Flynn after the government requests to dismiss the case, that'll be the first time in history. You'll be literally punishing a defendant because the government tried to correct a wrong. And that would be one of the worst things that could ever happen in this country, because people change their guilty plea all the time when they find out that the government did something corrupt. And Judge Sullivan should honor this request, not stand in the way of it.
Yeah, it's a really crazy thing. And I think
Dangerous.
As we see all of this coming out, I think Americans there's a lot to digest. I mean, there has been a lot that's happened. And from the beginning, Senator Graham, we've all said that the Russian collusion idea was a hoax. You're leading the charge in finding out how and why this Russian hoax started.
Many people
many people actually believe that the whole thing was actually an attempt to nullify the legitimate results of the 2016 election, which brought President Trump into office.
Right.
What are your thoughts? Why did this whole thing start?
This is a really good question. A counterintelligence investigation can be opened with almost very little evidence. A counterintelligence investigation is designed to protect American entities from foreign influence. We know that all kind of governments are trying to interfere in our elections. The Chinese, the Russians, they're doing it all over the place. A counterintelligence investigation is designed to protect the people that are focus of foreign investigations. Dianne Feinstein had a driver that had been working with her for years who was of Chinese origin. They found out that the driver had contacts to the Chinese intelligence community. They told Dianne so she could fire him. They opened up counterintelligence investigations on General Flynn, Carter Page, Papadopoulos, and Manafort. They never once told President Trump, we have concerns that some of your people may have Russian ties. Why did they tell Feinstein and not Trump? And we know they briefed Clinton about concerns they had with her campaign. Here's what we know. Papadopoulos is no more a Russian agent than I am a Chinese astronaut. They never got a warrant on him, but they were wiretapping when he was overseas, and he said on tape, I don't know no Russians, I haven't been working with any Russians. If I worked with the Russians, that would be treason. He was convicted of a process crime unrelated to working with the Russians. Carter Page, you talk about a guy got screwed.
Yep.
Carter Page was a low-level advisor of the Trump campaign, met the president one time. They got a FISA warrant against Carter Page, and the key document was the dossier, the Russian dossier. This dossier is a bunch of garbage. It has a lot of very embarrassing vignettes against President Trump. It accuses him of going to Russia and doing a bunch of crazy stuff. That dossier was prepared by Christopher Steele, who was on the payroll of the Democratic Party. So there was collusion between parties in Russia. It was the Democrats working with Christopher Steele, who was on the payroll, who hired a Russian connected to the intelligence community to prepare a dossier that's a bunch of crap that was used to get a warrant 4 times. And here's where it gets really interesting. In January of 2017, they found the Russian who did the work for Steele. They interviewed him for 3 straight days, and he said everything in there is bar talk and hearsay. I can't stand behind it. Horowitz, the inspector general, found 17 violations of the FISA warrant application process. We're going to dig into that. And here's the question. Why did they continue to pursue warrants after they found out that the dossier was unreliable? Why did they go to Harry Reid with the dossier before the election? Why didn't they investigate it as being Russian disinformation, as 2 FBI agents said, we think this is a Russian disinformation campaign? Why did they treat Trump so differently than Clinton?
Yeah, well, that is the question a lot of folks want answered.
Stay tuned.
Yes, well, we will stay tuned. But there's so many aspects to all of this. And one of those is Crossfire Hurricane. So under your leadership, the Senate Judiciary Committee is considering subpoenaing information pertaining to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Can you explain that investigation and why the American people deserve to know the truth there as well?
Well, so Crossfire Hurricane was the name of the investigation that was opened up in 2016. It focused on 4 people: Carter Page, Papadopoulos, General Flynn, and Manafort. Manafort was charged with tax crimes.
Right.
Not one of the 4 was there any evidence found to suggest that they worked with the Russians in any way during the campaign. Not once did they inform President Trump that he may have a problem. Counterintelligence investigations require defensive briefings. Why did they choose not to alert President Trump of any concerns they had? We know in January the 4th, 2017, they wanted to close the Flynn case out. Why did it take Mueller 2 years? What the hell was Mueller looking at when it came to Flynn when they were ready to close the case out in January 4th, 2017? He did get appointed to May. As to Carter Page, the Russian subsource in January 2017 came in and told the FBI the dossier is a bunch of hearsay, bar talk, garbage. Without it, there would be no justification for a warrant. Why did they look at Carter Page for 2 years? Papadopoulos is on tape saying, I didn't work with any Russians, it would be treason. They never found any evidence linking Carter Page to the Russian intelligence community. So the question is, what crime were they looking at in May and August of 2017? What had these 4 people done? 0. Why did it take 2 years? That's what I'm going to be looking at. And how is it possible that McCabe and Comey did not know that in January 2017, that the key document needed to keep the warrant going against Carter Page, the Russian dossier, had been disavowed? Are you telling me that one of the most high-profile investigations in the history of the FBI, that it didn't work its way up to the top? Oh, by the way, our case just fell apart? This is what I want to know. It's going to take the summer, early fall. We start the first weekend in June. We're going to go through this very methodically. We're going to talk to people that were key players in Crossfire Hurricane. We're going to take the Horowitz report and build on it. And we're going to try to explain to the American people how off the rails this got and how dangerous it is, and make sure it never happens again.
Well, thank God. And, you know, I think something that a lot of people want to know, Senator Graham, when do we get the $30 million of taxpayer money back that went into the Mueller investigation? How do we get 2 years of the American people's lives back? How does General Michael Flynn recover his life? I mean, these people were so reckless with what they did. And obviously, we'll find out. We will stay tuned. And you're going to hopefully come up with some answers for us. But no one will ever get that money back. No one will ever get their time back. No matter what happens to General Flynn, he will never regain his reputation. I mean, the financial implications for Flynn and his family are unthinkable. Right. This stuff, it's not just about we'll be cute and continue an investigation, even though we know that it's all bogus from the beginning because we dislike the president so much. This affected every single American to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And by the way, it probably divided our country a lot more than ever needed to be done. So these people have a lot to answer. And you know what? We'll probably never get answers to everything, unfortunately.
Well, you can't right every wrong, but John Durham is a U.S. attorney from Connecticut. Attorney General Barr has put him in charge of finding out whether or not crimes were committed in the process of getting a warrant against Carter Page and in prosecuting General Flynn. My job is oversight to explain to the American people how Crossfire Hurricane got off the rails. Durham's job is to hold people criminally accountable if they violated the law. How does this end? The FBI needs to have its credibility restored. If somebody's not fired and nobody goes to jail, why should the American people trust this system to be better than it was? So here's my goal, to explain as much as possible how it got started, how it got off the rails, and ask people in charge to fire those who are responsible and give Durham the space to hold people accountable. A lot of damage has been done to General Flynn. Some of it we can correct, some of it we can't. But if we do not hold people accountable through the criminal system and just public accountability, the likelihood of this happening again is great. This is one of the worst abuses of the law since the J. Edgar Hoover days. And when it comes to Trump, the media could give a damn. As long as you're trying to get Trump, they don't care what you do. If this had been a Republican paid operative,
oh my God,
getting dirt on Hillary Clinton,
could you imagine?
A Russian subsource that was a liar. They used it to get a warrant against somebody in her campaign. The country would be on fire. It would be front page news everywhere. So what have we learned? We've learned that when it comes to the media, there is an egregious double standard. What have we learned? That you can't just trust the system. You have to watch the system. Thank God for Bill Barr. Bill Barr has done a hell of a job trying to clean up this mess. But I just tell you now, everybody was breathless about Mueller, saying all the things they said about your family. And it turned out to be, no, they're there. Will the media look at what I'm trying to do? Probably not, but you will. Some other people will. And I'm going to create a record for history so this will not go unanswered. And it's going to take a while, starting in June. I'm going to issue a report by October, before the election, trying to explain how bad Crossfire Hurricane was.
Well, thank God that you're looking into it. We appreciate that. Senator Graham, stay right there. And everybody at home, we will be right back after this very short commercial break. Stay with us.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Take a look at my record, man.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others.
He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement and kept telling the story anyway.
I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff.
Now, his aides went back to say, look, he was in office marching for the idea.
That's not the word marching means.
Twitter.
I was not out marching.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
And you ain't black. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black.
The most racist thing a person could tell me is that I'm supposed to choose something based on my race.
You ain't black.
Hey, Lara Trump here. The fake news media has spent years trying to stop President Trump with their lies and their witch hunts. But still, our movement is stronger than ever. We can't let the fake news media drown out our positive message about all of our incredible accomplishments. Make sure you're getting your news directly from the source by subscribing to the official Donald J. Trump podcast today. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. All right, welcome back to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, and I'm joined by Senator Lindsey Graham from the great state of South Carolina. We just heard, you got that right, we just heard what's happening with General Flynn's case and why it's so important for all of us to understand this case. Senator Graham, let's talk about what you and President Trump have accomplished regarding America's foreign policy. In January, President Trump made the critical decision to shut down travel from China to the United States. Now, this was a decision that saved thousands of American lives, maybe tens of thousands of American lives, as the coronavirus spread from China throughout the world. Joe Biden, big shocker here, repeatedly called President Trump's travel restriction hysterical xenophobia and fear-mongering. We know Biden has a long history of defending China. Why does Joe Biden always choose China's well-being over the United States? Shouldn't this be a concern for voters?
I think it should be a great concern, and if you did the opposite of Joe Biden on foreign policy, you would be in the Hall of Fame. I like Joe. I've known him for a long time, but he's been wrong about everything. It was Joe Biden who said it would be a good idea to do a deal with the Ayatollah, the Iranian Ayatollah. Let's give him $150 billion in sanctions relief. I'm sure he will build roads and bridges and be a good member of the family of nations. The Iran nuclear deal is a threat to Israel. They took the money and they dismembered the Mideast. This is one of the Joe Biden, John Kerry ideas. The Iran nuclear deal was withdrawn by President Trump, thank God. Yep. They took the money, dismembered the Mideast, and still have the capability to make a bomb. It was Joe Biden's idea to get out of Iraq when the general said, no, we need some troops here to keep it from going bad. It was Joe Biden who pushed Obama to pull out of Iraq. It was Joe Biden who sent troops into Afghanistan and gave the day you were going to withdraw. If it weren't for Joe Biden and Barack Obama, there would have never been an ISIS. So let's look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump rebuilt a military that had been broken. We were short of ammunition. Morale was low. They had their hands behind their back when it came to fighting ISIS and the Taliban in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. President Trump comes in. He increases military spending like Ronald Reagan. He replenished all the weapon systems that had been depleted. The planes were being flown. The wings were falling off. People were going back and forth, back and forth. He increased the size of the military. He rejuvenated the military. He told the guys to go kill these bastards. They killed these bastards. The caliphate's dead. We got out of the deal with Iran, thank God. We've recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We've never been a better friend to Israel than that of Donald Trump. Standing up to China, Trump said, stop travel to China. It saved millions of Americans from an infection. To those who say this virus is not that bad, if we had done nothing, you'd have a couple of million dead Americans now. We locked the country down. It's now time to open up. Trump's been right about China. That's one of the reasons he was elected president. Most Americans are getting tired of being played by China. And Obama and Biden were as weak as they could be in the face of radical Islam. They misjudged the Ayatollah. North Korea was running wild. China was eating our lunch. We got a new sheriff in town, and I can't wait to vote.
I love it. We need you at every polling location.
I can't wait to
doing
vote.
that spiel. That's fantastic. Well, we know that the Obama-Biden administration's foreign policy truly weakened America's standing on the world stage, made our country less safe. And you even said this, but Obama's own defense secretary, Robert Gates, said that Joe Biden had been wrong on nearly every foreign policy issue over the last 40 years. Even Joe Biden said we should not have gone in and killed Osama bin Laden when they were planning that raid. Joe Biden was the one that said, don't do it. What does it say about Joe Biden and his ability to make the tough decisions? Does it give you nightmares, Senator Graham, to think about Joe Biden as being in charge of America on national security?
I would love to go to dinner with Joe. He's a fine fellow, but as commander-in-chief, I think it would be very bad for the country in this regard. Joe did object to going after bin Laden, and give President Obama credit. That was a tough call. President Trump killed Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. Joe Biden said that was a bad idea. When President Trump stopped travel into the United States from China, he called President Trump xenophobic. They all called ISIS the JV. They lavished praise on each other for the Iran nuclear agreement. All I can say is that Joe Biden's judgment when it comes to being commander-in-chief, let's don't go there. Nation. President Trump's greatest accomplishment to me, greatest of all, really, is restoring our position in the world. Yeah. I mean, domestic policy is important, but we've learned what happens when you take your eye out the ball over there. 9/11. We saw how America was treated under the Obama years. Our friends couldn't trust us anymore. Our enemies walked all over us. This is Memorial Day. We've had thousands of people, about 6,000 plus, die in Iraq and Afghanistan. We lost 3,000 Americans almost in an instant on 9/11. So foreign policy is not talked about enough. but I can tell you the terrorists are out there trying to hurt us every day. If the Ayatollah had a nuclear weapon, I'm convinced he would use it against our friends in Israel and try to turn the world into his version of Islam. He's a religious Nazi. China has been eating our lunch. Thank God that President Trump has stood up to China, and we're putting tariffs when they cheat, and we're going to make them pay for the coronavirus. If China had told the world the truth, you wouldn't have so many dead Americans and so many people out of work. So I just admire President Trump's willingness to change things that need to be changed. And when it comes to standing behind those in uniform, he's in the class of Ronald Reagan. And this is a special day for America. This is a Memorial Day. This is time we pay tribute to those who didn't make it home. The best way you can honor them is to make sure that those in the fight have what they need and be a country worth dying for.
Gosh, that is so well said, and you're exactly right. And our thoughts are with everyone out there, family members whose loved ones didn't come home, who fought and died for this country. It is the greatest sacrifice anyone could ever make, and thank God we have the great people in our military, the men and women that fight for this country every day, because that is why we're here. That is why we are the greatest country in the world, and we always will be. I want to get your thoughts on something, because I know this is something you've been working on. In December of last year, a Saudi aviation student killed 3 American sailors at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola. I think everybody probably remembers hearing about that. This past week, Attorney General Barr confirmed that Al-Qaeda and the killer had been in contact with each other. Now, this is a horrible story that I know you've been following closely. You tweeted that you have questions about this incident. You said, how did the vetting process fail? Why were so many apparent ties to Al-Qaeda missed? Senator Graham, what can we do to ensure nothing like this ever happens again in the United States? How important is it to have a president like President Trump and a Republican-controlled Congress in charge?
Well, President Trump clamped down on immigration coming in from hot spots. They accused him of being xenophobic, anti-Muslim. President Trump lives in the real world. Al-Qaeda is out there, right? General Flynn told the Obama administration, yes, we killed bin Laden, but the organization still is alive and well, and they fired Flynn for saying that. This is proof positive that the terrorists are still operating. They're trying to recruit people from all over the world. So let's make sure that when we get foreign pilots coming in from hot spots, that we need allies, but let's vet. Never take your foot off their throat. All of our troops forward deployed are a virtual wall. We got a wall we need to build on our southern border so people can't just walk into our country, including terrorists. You can't build a wall around the radical Islamic threat, but you can have our people working with friends over there to keep them from coming here. And this is a wake-up call. Al-Qaeda is still trying to penetrate America. The more intelligence we have, building up the military to give us the capability, increasing the ability of the CIA to find out what's going on. I think President Trump's biggest accomplishment is rebuilding a broken military and an intelligence community that was allowed to basically deteriorate. The Saudi case is an example of the war is not over.
Yeah, well, it's not over. And look, we can't take anything for granted. And you never hear about ISIS anymore. You never hear so much about that. That's a lot thanks to President Trump and our great military. But we can never, as you said, we can never for a second take our foot off their throats, as you said. We have to always stay vigilant. We have to always be looking out. And the work you're doing with President Trump is so critical to ensuring that our country stays safe and secure. Is there one message you want to leave the American people with today?
Yeah, you can do it without 100,000 troops. You don't need 100,000 troops. President Trump has brought a lot of our troops home, and I'm glad. We've got hundreds in Syria, not thousands, working with the Kurds, a good ally, to keep the oil out of the hands of the Iranians and ISIS. As long as we guard those oil fields, we'll get some of the money to pay for the cost. ISIS can never come back in Syria. We're down to less than like 8,000 troops. We had about 180,000 in Afghanistan. We can keep several thousand of them over there working with the Afghans to keep ISIS and Al-Qaeda from coming back. What President Trump has done is he's made NATO members give $400 billion of new money. He's asked our allies, why should we do this all by ourselves?
That's right.
So I like the idea that he's making people pay more, making people on the ground fight. In Syria, we lost 8 people. God bless those 8, but most of the fighting and dying was done by the Kurds, who helped destroy the caliphate. So they're good allies. So what I like about President Trump, he's reducing our role. We're not knocking the doors down anymore. We're helping them with aviation and intelligence and special operations. But we got to have some of us over there partnering with people who reject this ideology. Let's just end with this. We're going into an election. This is one of the biggest choices you'll ever have. Are we going to go back to the economy of stagnation? Are we going to go back to the foreign policy of weakness? Or are we going to continue to march forward of rebuilding in an America where everybody benefits? Before the virus, Hispanic and African American families were doing the best they'd done in a generation. Before the virus, we had an economy that was the envy of the world. Here's the question. To get out of this hole caused by the virus, who do you trust? The man who did it once, or Joe Biden, who caused the problem in terms of stagnation to begin with? Where do you want to go in terms of an America? Do you want to go back to the Obama-Biden apologist America? Or do you want to stay out front and lead like President Trump's doing and asking others to do their fair share? I'm confident about the outcome of this election if people understand what's at stake. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security. Joe Biden's a nice man, but we don't need that. We need a strong man. And President Trump's a strong man.
Well, I know who's going to get my vote, Lindsey, and I think we know who's getting yours.
Yeah, we're not.
Well, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Senator Lindsey Graham, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Happy Memorial Day. Thanks.
Thank you. Back by popular demand.
Wednesday just got better because the ladies are live discussing the hottest topics of the week with you tonight.
And we will make America great again.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. We need as many patriots as possible to join our efforts to keep America great this November. Here's how you can get involved. As always, be sure to text Trump to 88022. You can download the Trump 2020 app from the App Store today. It's available for iPhone and Android. And this is where you can register for events, become a volunteer, and earn exclusive prizes. I'd like to thank our special guest, Senator Lindsey Graham, once again for joining us this evening. And thanks to you, our patriots at home, for being with us tonight. We'll see you next time.